I'm so excited that you've decided to invest your time in our course for a professional diploma in candle making. Over the duration of these modules, we will be covering candle production setup, basic and advanced candle making, candle customization, as well as how to market your candle making business. During this lesson, we're going to be discussing the following objectives: the value of candles, the historic process of candle making, as well as the scope of the candle making field. Did you know? Early Egyptians made candle-like light sources called rush lights by soaking the core of reeds in animal fat and lighting them. They are not, however, considered the first true candles, as they don't technically have a wick. Our first topic in this lesson is to look at the value of candles in everyday life. Throughout the ages, candles have been used as both a functional and aesthetic product. Despite the invention of the light bulb, which virtually nullified our need for open flames as a light source, we've still chosen to continue our use of this timeless form of illumination. Although not always the most functional, there is simply nothing that compares to ambient light when it comes to special occasions, a romantic dinner for instance, a soothing bath after a stressful day, or a balmy evening on the patio. In my opinion, these things are all made better when lit by candle. That being said, electricity, and therefore lighting, still leaves us in the lurch at times. Having a candle or two handy has helped us through many a power outage with its functional flame of light. Just as importantly, electricity is still not an option everywhere. Many homes and areas are not reliant on this modern convenience and choose to make use of the original methods of functioning. How else do we choose to use candles? Can you think of any specific moments when candles are used? Pop your answers into Morpheus now. Why else are candles used? Well, we don't always use them in ways that relate to the function of light. My personal favorite is on birthday cakes. Children around the world delight in the glee of blowing out their birthday candles each and every year. Religious and traditional ceremonies are also known to make use of candles in symbolism relating to specific events, such as weddings. The unity candle lighting is a popular choice at the moment. In this, the couple each light their own candle and then use their individual candles to simultaneously light a larger central candle. This central candle being lit symbolizes the beginning of a new family unit. Certain religious holidays such as Hanukkah in Jewish tradition and Diwali in Hindu culture are also marked by their use of candles. Hanukkah is a ritual whereby one of 9 candles in a menorah is lit daily. This daily lighting is a way of remembering and celebrating the lasting oil in the temple that held for 8 days. Diwali is a celebration of the return of deities. Candles and lamps are lit to aid their coming home after 14 days of exile. Candles are also a handy way to facilitate aromatherapy and introduce scent into spaces we'd like to fragrance. Not only can the smell relax us, but the soft flickering light has a very soothing effect on our minds. Nowadays, we use candles very widely as decor items in our homes. Their aesthetic, both lit and unlit, adds a sense of perceived comfort. Additionally, candle accessories such as sconces, votives, and holders are all widely available and exceptionally fashionable. Without the humble candle, their existence would be rather pointless, wouldn't it? Feng Shui, a balancing practice to harmonize spaces, also incorporates the need for fire. Candles are a very easy way to incorporate this element into a space. Citronella candles are a wonderful natural way to repel various bugs and especially mosquitoes. A candle is the perfect way to diffuse their fragrance into the air when camping or dining outdoors during the summer. Travel candles are a new trend that is taking the market by storm. Most companies making fragrance candles have also begun selling this handy product too. How many times have you checked into a hotel room, or worse yet, a hostel, and felt put off by this strange environment because the odor was unfamiliar to you? Travel candles are made in small tins, they're lightweight, allowing them to be easily transported and used in areas that you might like to make a little homier than they are upon arrival. There are a variety of candles out there, from your craft market candles to your more glamorous candles. Let's explore the different types available. Owing to the many different uses, the candle-making craft has evolved over time to encompass an enormous amount of variety. Some examples of formats are as follows. Taper candles are most commonly used as dinner candles in holders. They're slender and tall, making them easy to see past to the other side of the table. Pillar candles almost always need to be made in molds and from a sturdy wax, thereby allowing them to stand up on their own. They are larger and thicker than taper candles and don't necessarily need a holder. Their bigger structure allows for a fairly long burn time. Votive candles are generally smaller and contained in a glass vessel. They're used as a complementary candle to their larger counterparts. This is especially useful when trying to create an aesthetic height difference in flames on, say, a dinner table. Pot candles are a recent trend. These candles are made inside their glass canister and come with a lid. This is functional in that it deprives an extinguished wick of oxygen, preventing it from relighting, and it keeps the wax clean and free of dust when the candle isn't lit. In fragranced candles, it also helps contain the scent and prevent it from evaporating. Floating candles are something I've loved since childhood. They can be suspended in any water you like, making them ideal to float in swimming pools when you're hosting an outdoor function. They can also be buoyed up in water-filled vases as a means of table decor. A great advantage of these candles is that they're relatively mess-free. The burnt wax can't drip into linen or onto furniture and simply remains in the water. Carved candles are essentially works of art. The time, skill, and patience that goes into them is a refined technique, but one which is very well worth learning. These candles are generally made in molds, then dipped into many additional layers of wax. Thereafter, the candle maker will use a sharp object to carve shapes out of the candle, allowing the multicolored inners to be exposed and the shape of the candle to be converted into something far more flamboyant. Themed candles are those candles that are decorated in a certain way. These kinds of candles will generally depict something specific, for example, Santa Claus, a cartoon character, or a family photograph, to name a few. Think about the candles in your home. Do you recognize any of these structures? Variations in candles have also expanded to include a selection of alternative wax options. Paraffin wax is still our most common medium, with its sturdy structure and easy availability. It's a favorite for many reasons, but its reasonable price is certainly a drawcard. Soy wax is a fairly new option and is becoming very popular as a natural alternative. Being composed of only soy, it contains no chemical additives and appeals to those who are more conscious of such things. This brings us to our other natural alternative, beeswax. As you know, it was one of the wax forms used in historic times. Its favor hasn't diminished over time though, and it remains a staple option to this day. Palm wax is yet another naturally derived wax. It is far thicker than other forms of wax, making it good to use in candles needing a longer burning time. A huge advantage of this, and other natural waxes of course, is that they are all entirely biodegradable. Can you imagine there being any more options than these? Well, hang on to your hats, because there is indeed another variable, the wick. These days, we've deviated from our near-exclusive use of a plain cotton wick to include a wealth of other options. For a long period of time, we were only making use of cotton wicks. Within cotton wicks are a few subcategories of wick, though, too. Zinc core wicks are wrapped in cotton but contain exactly what their name describes, a zinc core. This allows the wick to stand up straight on its own while making the candle. Eco wicks were created to work alongside the natural wax options. This is also a cotton wick and has been braided together with natural paper filaments to aid in burning. Now that we know a little more about what our course offers, let's look into the history of the amazing candle making craft. The point at which to start is by asking, when were candles first documented? Although we don't have clarity on exactly when the very first candle was made, It is widely believed that the Romans can be credited with the creation of our first candles. We also know that variants of candles were created in different countries around the world from approximately 3000 BC. Each country or region had their own way of manufacturing this light source, though. For instance, the Romans were using tallow, the Chinese using whale fat, and in India, boiled cinnamon was used. The first wicked candles were made by the ancient Romans, who dipped papyrus cores in animal fat or beeswax, and used candles as both a light source and as gifts during celebrations. The Chinese, however, received credit for creating the first molded candles. They were said to roll paper to shape the candle and use rice paper as a wick. China is also our source of the oldest surviving candles. Produced using whale fat, these candles were made in approximately 200 BC. The answer is that during the early production of candles, a common wax medium used was tallow, a purified form of sheep or beef fat. Another wax preference in those early days was that of beeswax. This wasn't quite as common though because it was a more expensive option and something reserved for wealthier people. There was a brief period during the colonial times when berries from the bayberry bush boiled to produce wax. The extraction process, however, was labor-intensive and resulted in less enthusiasm for this product. As an animal lover, this last one pains me to list, but we cannot omit to mention that during the 18th century, with the onset of whaling practices, whale fat, known as spermaceti wax, became a staple in the candle-making process. Here's a question I'd like you to think about. Why do you think humans might have preferred the use of beeswax or whale fat to the use of tallow or animal fats? The answer to that is that tallow smelled awful and gave off rather a lot of black smoke. The cleaner beeswax and spermaceti wax were far more gentle in fragrance and smoke emissions. The evolution from these candles over time has been incredible. Let's take a look and see. From the first Roman candles documented, it seems as though people have been trying to improve upon the craft ever since. We still are today. During the 13th century, candle making became a recognized profession in England and France, where chandlers, or candle makers, would go to people's homes and make candles in their kitchens. Animal fats not used in cooking were saved all week, so that when the chandler arrived, he could use the household byproduct to create their light source for them. Chandlers and their profession became more and more common over the years and grew from simply working in homes to producing the candles that were used as the first light source in the streets of Paris. In the 19th century, we see candle making become industrialized by Joseph Morgan, who invented the machine that mass-produced molded candles. With this equipment, it became possible to produce 1,500 candles in just 1 hour, a feat previously unheard of. A quote from his patent is rather sweet in its simplicity, and it reads, "With 3 men and 5 boys, this machine will manufacture 2 tons of candles in 12 hours. In the 1850s, a man named James Young distilled the first known paraffin wax. He used byproducts from the refining process of crude petroleum to create this first man-made wax alternative. This is what is still the most widely used form of wax to our current day." Something interesting to note was that before electric light, indoor lighting at night was really not terribly effective. People had to adapt to function in the very low light conditions provided by their candles. You may not know this, but the excessive use of silver and gold in wealthy Georgian sitting rooms was in fact also a tactic to increase the amount of light available. The gilded rims of plates, the lavish keyholes, and even the metallic trim on male and female clothing all were in aid of increasing the reflection of light in a room and adding to the nighttime illumination. Fascinating, isn't it? The Hall of Mirrors at the Versailles Palace in France has gone down in history as the first location where adequate light was achieved to enable evening parties to be a possibility. The designers of this luminant room placed mirrors strategically, thereby enabling the single flame of each candle to be reflected in the glass again and again. This created indoor light that might have achieved the level of brightness we deem acceptable today. This section of our candle history I'm sure you didn't see coming. Candle clocks. Some of my favorite candle history trivia is that candles were used as some of our very first clocks. Probably not clocks that would have been as accurate as ours are today, but nonetheless devices that ancient people used in order to keep track of the time. How did they do this, you might ask? The way it works is that the clock candles were made to a set standard of specifications. The type of wax, how quickly it burnt, as well as the width and height of the candles needed to be consistent. The candle was then marked at specific increments. For example, a centimeter of the candle could equate to 30 minutes of time. When lit, from the time the candle began burning until it reached the line marking the centimeter, one knew an hour had passed. This wasn't where its use stopped, though. These candles could even be used as alarm clocks. If someone needed to be awoken or alerted to a certain amount of time having passed, say, if bread was being baked perhaps, you could gently insert a nail into the candle at the appropriate distance down for the amount of time you needed to be marked. Once the candle had burnt down to the point of the nail, the wax would melt, causing the nail to drop from the candle to the surface it stood on. When you heard the metal nail dropping to a solid surface, you would know that the allotted amount of time had passed. These clock candles were, of course, less sophisticated than our timepieces today and were limited by certain factors. Unfortunately, the flame being unexpectedly extinguished could result in the timing being compromised. These devices were also not able to tell what time of day it was, but merely mark the passing of a certain amount of time. Lastly, a badly made candle would result in the outcome of the readings being compromised. If burn time and wax density were not consistent, the final product would not give accurate readings. We've already covered so much information today. Let's take a moment to rest our minds before we continue with this exciting lesson. And while we do that, I'll introduce Lesson 2 to you. In our next session together, we're going to be speaking more about the specific candle making terminology that professional candle makers use. So don't forget to attend your second class to keep building on the skills you've already obtained today. For now though, let's get back to Lesson 1 and finish off with our next topic. Our last topic of this lesson will be introducing the description and scope of the field. We begin this topic by asking, what do people expect from candles? These days, candles are less of a necessity and more of a delightful addition to a home or occasion. When we use them, though, we have certain expectations of what they should do. This is important to keep in mind now that you're thinking of making your own contribution to the world of candles. When we invest in a candle, we generally want it to be made from good quality raw materials. There's nothing worse than having the dye in the wax come off on your hand, or even worse, on furniture, creating a stain. We want the wax to be supple and not brittle so that the slightest bump causes a break. We want them to have an adequate burning time for the size and price of the candle too. Now that you've gained some insight to the field at large, I'd like you to begin thinking about which type of candle making excites you most. We currently have so many styles and ways available to us that being a master at each technique would take time. Identifying what appeals to you will help to focus your attention upon completion of this course. Do you like the idea of creating paraffin candles in molds? The precision, the flawless shop-bought look of a neatly shaped final product? Do you connect with the idea of becoming like the artisans of old and hand-dipping candles as has been done for centuries? Do you like the idea of making soy candles in containers, potentially combining fragrances and using them in an entirely natural medium? Or perhaps you like the idea of manipulating beeswax in its various forms, connecting with the nature of the insect and the process it went through to provide us with this wax, which can now be used in a secondary process of your choosing. While taking into account these expectations one has of a candle and our different processes in making them, is there perhaps a direction in this craft that stands out to you? A candle process you might like to give specific attention to mastering? Give this question some thought by asking, would you prefer your candles to have a more handmade feel, or do you like the professional finish of a mold? Are you interested in making more environmentally friendly candles, or do the traditional waxes appeal to you? Are you more interested in simple functionality, or do you like the idea of incorporating additives like colors or scent? By way of further inspiration, I'd like to show you an example of a candle-making titan and one of the success stories of our time, Jo Malone. This creative woman began combining fragrances and other variants from a very early age. What started as a home industry, born of passion for the fragrant products she created, transformed into a brand that is recognized across the globe. Her story is my favorite kind of entrepreneurial tale. Her passion for what she did took her from creating products at her kitchen table in 1988 to opening her first retail store in London in 1994, and finally selling her company to Estee Lauder. Initially, while working at home, she said she was using 4 plastic jugs and 2 saucepans. Isn't this the most relatable story for all of us? The following fun fact is going to blow your mind. If every Jo Malone fragranced candle bought during the month of December were to be lit one after the other, they would burn for a collective 740 years. Isn't the sheer volume of that number extraordinary? I like to think that each one of us has the potential to launch a brand with the same kind of scope as this. I'd like to close this lesson by furnishing you with the knowledge of the proper etiquette of candles. As with many things in life, we as candle makers need to pay special attention to the assumed customs relating to our craft. Firstly, and most importantly, we must never leave a burning candle unattended. If you're leaving the room or feeling sleepy while lying down, it's best to extinguish the flame. Never burn a candle with a cotton wick for longer than 4 hours at a time. This extended burn time could lead to mushrooming of the wick. Be sure to clean the melted wax within the candle, keeping it free from the bits and pieces that fall in while it's hot. These small additions can cause issues with future burning. Each and every time you plan to burn your candle, make sure to trim your wick. This is something you'll hear me say many more times throughout this course, and it is of vital importance to your candle's performance. Prior to every burn, your wick should be examined and, if necessary, trimmed to the height of 6 millimeters. It isn't a good idea to burn the very last centimeter of wax in your jar or of a freestanding candle. Getting too close to the bottom of the candle will generate more heat than can be tolerated by a vessel or touched by a person. Never burn a candle to just part of the surface area. Always allow it to burn long enough. As we come to the end of our lesson, let's do a quick recap on the various points we covered. The value of candles, the history of candles, and the scope of the candle making field at large. Tell me, can you think of any time not mentioned here when you have experienced the use of candles?